Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The World's Greatest Sinner from 1962. The World's Greatest Sinner is potentially the most notorious underground cult movie ever made. It's kind of a cult movie for cult movie people. Although I said this film came out in 1962, it never really got a release per se in terms of how we know movies are to be released. It was kind of independently released, and Timothy Carey, the director, would go out to various places with a print of the film to play it, but it never really got widely shown until Turner Classic Movies played it in about 2008, and they still play it occasionally during the TCM Underground slot on Saturday nights. It had always gained a lot of momentum through bootlegs and acclaim from various directors, but until it played on TCM, then I think it certainly became legendary. Although it was legendary before, but it got a little more widespread legendary, because this is a movie beyond comprehension, moving on its own kind of filmic language. There's certain films where you go, oh, that was shot over a couple of years, I didn't notice. But The World's Greatest Sinner, that's all part of the charm. It is badly made, but purposefully made. It is insane, crazy, a very interesting film about hubris, while also being a very big example of hubris and kind of colliding at you in a way that you'd never really expect. The World's Greatest Sinner is quite an experience, and an experience, to be honest, if you have ever known me socially, I've probably made you watch a couple times, whether you wanted to or not. It is a crazy, insane film, and sometimes when I watch it, I'm like, how did this happen? A film that would have never been made by a major studio, even today, really, but especially at the time. The son of Timothy Carey said it's not ahead of its time, it was the time, but honestly, I think of it as timeless because it's so undefinable. I don't think any time can really define this movie, but it was really talking about the hubris of celebrity, rock stars, and everything like that. And it's really presented like a screenplay of a crazy, eccentric character actor, which Timothy Carey very much was, but produced completely accurately and with all the craziness intact. This is a movie that I often just love to tell people about because I cannot believe I've had the honor of seeing it. And if you ever do, watch out, because The World's Greatest Sinner is coming for you. It is just one of the most craziest cult films I could have ever imagined, and somehow it's real. Clarence Hilliard, who is a frustrated insurance salesman who decides he doesn't want to sell insurance anymore and is finding life meaningless, but then decides to preach that everyone is their own god and can live forever, and everyone has the potential to be superhuman, and then decides to form a rock band and become a huge rock star named God Hilliard, and then eventually run for president and become an incredibly popular figure that no one can stop, as his new blasphemous cultish religion is taking the country by storm. Timothy Carey, really, I could do a video just about him. He's an incredibly crazy kind of individual. You probably most know him, if you do know him, from the two Stanley Kubrick movies, The Paths of Glory and The Killing, and he was the only actor who Stanley Kubrick let improvise, and apparently Stanley Kubrick actually liked him to a point, although they stopped working together after that. So apparently Kirk Douglas hated him. Apparently, to win a part in Prince Valiant, he in costume scaled the walls of 20th Century Fox. Carl Malden, I think, punched him. I might be wrong about that, or at least hated him. Marlon Brando stabbed him with a pen. He was working on a personal project during Godfather, so he turned that down, and then flat out turned down Godfather 2 just because he didn't want to be in it. He is one of those character actor, urban legend type of personalities who lives up to everything you'd want them to be, and if you think of that personality, you can imagine what a film he directed and wrote would be like. And this was very much a passion project for him. I believe they started shooting in 1958. It was eventually shown, I guess is the more accurate description, in 1962, and was played a lot after that, but it was never fully released, and there's some confusion. A lot about this film is just like, you're not hearing the source, you're hearing it through people, so I kind of love the urban underground legend of it, and the version I'm reviewing is the 1965 cut, so the original version that was played is probably different from this, although Timothy Carey kept working on it and kept editing it up until his death in 1994, so I'm very curious what the final cut was, but this is the version most people have seen. I taped it off TCM at the time, although I will admit I need to buy a DVD of it just because I didn't know if they'd ever play it again. It seemed like kind of a once in a lifetime thing, and it really was, although they do play it semi-frequently for Turner Classic Movies at least. And it got quite an interesting reputation. Some people absolutely hate this film, but a lot of people love this film. Martin Scorsese calls it one of his favorite rock and roll films. Bonnie Prince Prince Billy champions the film and selected the film to play at the Maryland Film Festival during a selection of people's favorite films, which was in 2001. This film gets played a lot at film festivals and special screenings. It's that kind of an odd movie. And even I think Quentin Tarantino loves it. Timothy Carey was almost in Reservoir Dogs and auditioned for the role that Lawrence Tierney would eventually get. I'm sure Tarantino loved just seeing Timothy Carey because he's such a personality of a character actor, and him being the lead throughout The World's Greatest Sinner gives The World's Greatest Sinner its great personality. This film is very, very unique. It does feel like when you're going from scene to scene, each scene is disconnected from one another. They're so separate shoots, you feel like one was shot 6 months apart from the next thing. The lighting is often poor, but almost purposeful. It feels very post-film noir in that kind of cheaper Val Lewton way, but even cheaper than Val Lewton actually, because I believe this film cost $100,000. They really made the most of just having simple sets and having everything else black, which gives it a very demonic, crazy quality. People compare films a lot, like crazier flow films, to a fever dream. If this film was a fever dream, you were probably hospitalized for that fever and close to death. It is just an insane dream of a movie. It does feel like a dream, but a dream that you'd wake up from and just forget because you were just like, what the fuck was that? I mean, there's a lot of that going through The World's Greatest Sinner. I think a lot of what this film was talking about, and what was interesting watching the film this time, other than the other times, is this film is so much about hubris and the hubris of celebrity. And thinking about that, I hadn't watched this film in a couple of years, but watching it this time, I thought of like Kanye West and particularly Donald Trump. And watching this in a post Donald Trump running for president at the time I shot this review, I am very scared by this movie because it very much talks about hubris of celebrity and how far you will push this celebrity, as much as it's clearly using the iconography of like Elvis Presley, particularly when you see Timothy Carey jumping around on stage. I saw one review compared his belly shaking like radioactive jello, which it was a little weird, but I don't really know what radioactive jello looks like, but whatever. And apparently Elvis Presley asked for a copy and Timothy Carey said no, which is like, who the fuck? This film was very notorious because of that. Even John Cassavetes compared it to Eisenstein, which you're hearing that from Timothy Carey on a public access TV show, which somehow adds to the film's oddness because that's how we found out about that. And I heard Stanley Kubrick kind of liked it, but I can't find any of that when I researched it this time. It very much is talking about that hubris and critiquing it, and I've heard people say it's like if A Face in the Crowd didn't go far enough, and it is very much about that. It's interesting because this was so much a hubris of himself. He wanted to make a film that was more controversial. He wanted to make a film that could really prove something, that could really do something that no Hollywood film can do, and boy did he absolutely do that with this movie, because the movement of it is very silent film. The movement of it is like Eisenstein, but you have no sense of time within the movie, because sometimes they'll go, oh, it's been a year since you've talked to your wife, and you're like, isn't that 5 minutes ago? It moves up in this super hyper stylized way, but in a hyper stylized cheap way, which is not normally how you think of a hyper stylized movie. It feels like things were cut out, but maybe that was the point, not to have those things. It just feels crazy. That's probably why some people, particularly Frank Zappa, who helped score the film, considers it the world's worst movie, or as he said when he was on the Steve Allen show in 1963. And what's interesting about that is he helps promote The World's Greatest Sinner, probably gave it its greatest promotion, and then most people wouldn't see it until it played on Turner Classic Movies in 2008. So I don't really know how many people who saw that Steve Allen appearance actually ended up seeing The World's Greatest Sinner on TCM, but you know, it's plausible that someone did. Frank Zappa's music somehow gives it an even stranger energy. He uses odd instruments, and he was on the Steve Allen show to promote his own album and show off his like bicycle instrument thing, and he uses odd instrumentation, which adds to the kind of strangeness of it. You feel like you've kind of walked in on someone's odd dream that you're somehow watching on TV if you've ever just flipped this on. It's almost unexplainable, and it's almost hard to talk about, because as much as I think how it exemplified the hubris that goes on today with celebrities and how they think they can do everything, and particularly Donald Trump, I think it's almost on its own crazy wavelength that it's maybe is saying something, and it is a genius film, but I also just kind of like watching it and just being in awe of like, what the hell is this? Sometimes I feel like it is saying something, sometimes I feel like it's saying way too much and not saying anything. I do think this time, after watching it, what it's saying about hubris and how dangerous it is to the common man and how far people can go with hubris and the hubris of celebrity is quite dangerous and scary, and how someone could literally tackle down religion and become president and continue that hubris and ridiculous behavior to the nth degree is something that, at least in America, we're all living. So I think The World's Greatest Sinner kind of showed how how far this could really go. And I think that was a real scary thing at the birth of celebrity, and celebrity that didn't adhere to religion and following the kind of path that most people did, certainly the way rock and roll was. Since this came out in 1962, this was pre the Beatles, and certainly people taking on social mores and combining low class and high class ideas in very much a mass market appeal with their own hubris was something that people weren't sure how to handle. And I think now in 2016, when I shot this review, we are seeing that really come to a head and probably destroy us all, maybe, probably, hopefully not. I think The World's Greatest Sinner shows us a world that it's almost like conceptual in the way that it is a man who hubrisly decided to make the stranger, odder version of this. That's almost the most appropriate way to do it. Seeing someone, live in Biff world and stuff like that, that's almost typical. The World's Greatest Sinner, you could never say typical. If The World's Greatest Sinner is typical, clearly, I don't know what's been going on with movie making and society in general, but The World's Greatest Sinner, I don't think human evolution will never get to the point where The World's Greatest Sinner is typical, because it never can be. It is just such an odd experience. I actually, if I know someone who's seen it, we just want to gush about Timothy Carey and how crazy it is and how we can't believe this exists. But almost thinking of it now, I think one of the amazing things about it is what it does say about hubris and how it's really showing how far that can go. But I think the conceptual idea of someone making their own film and having the hubris to just do away with kind of a lot of filmmaking rules and make this crazy, strange film shows both the beauty of hubris and the danger of it at the same time, which is something I don't think a lot of films could ever really do. It was kind of made in a way that's also what the film is about, which is odd. But I love the feel of it. Almost feels like an underground film that you're just like, how did I get to see this? And maybe that's because of the various release history and how it didn't really have much of a release history until far recently. But if you are a cult movie fan and you're wondering what other cult movies can I see after you've seen the main ones, The World's Greatest Sinner is the one you absolutely have to see. If you see it's playing on Turner Classic Movies, you need to seek this out, because after you see it, you will just be like, I saw this crazy movie. Frank Zappa did the score before the Mothers of Invention. The World's Greatest Sinner is probably the most American underground cult movie in that it is probably the most critical of the American dream and the hubris that it creates and the celebrity it creates and the whole downfall of society probably as well, but also the kind of hindrance and scariness of religion falling and someone going up against God and all the kind of blasphemous ideas that you don't think anyone had the balls to do in 1962 or really even now. Timothy Carey flies in the face of that and makes an incredibly insane, unforgettable cult movie that you will not soon forget. And I know everyone who's seen it that I know has not ever forgotten, because The World's Greatest Sinner is a once-in-a-lifetime underground film cult classic that we will never soon replicate. So if you have seen The World's Greatest Sinner and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.